Hello, everyone. This is SIG Scalability meeting. Today is 6th June 2024, and I think Dallas will be starting with the first topic.
Hi, yeah, so I guess I was just looking for some general guidance on large clusters and getting clusters to tens of thousands of nodes. I noticed that the Kubernetes documentation still states that there's a 5,000 node recommendation, or I don't think that it explicitly states that there's a limit. But all the clusters that we've operated before in our company have always been 5,000 or less. Um, I think a number of years ago, we did some scalability exercises, and we kind of found that like etcd was like the limiting factor. And so we have some plans to do some benchmarks with and Kubern to test basically like segmenting different data sets within the etcd clusters to like separate physical clusters. I think like the events is one that I saw some people mentioning online that was something that people are doing. But I think to it a little bit closer, it seemed as though we could segment more than just events from the primary etcd cluster. And so I think that's kind of one of the areas that we're looking at to to address. I think another area was just around like the metric server seemed to have some limitations around 5,000 node limit. I think maybe as part of their data model, if I'm remembering correctly. So I guess I'm just kind of looking for some general guidance. Like, are there other things that we should be considering that's not part of that list?
I can start. I saw that you mentioned KubeBurn, right?
Yeah.
I know a little bit about this project, but there is also the one that we actually developed, which is Cluster Loader, which has kind of like, already existing tests that we run against
Oh, okay.
Kubernetes clusters. So that's something that you might want to consider using
Mhm.
instead. I'm not saying one or the other is better. I'm just saying like, we are more familiar with this one, and
Sure.
also we use it for Kubernetes testing. Uh, yeah, I think like the general idea of sharding the etcd, like more resources definitely makes sense. Um, but I don't have more actually information, like if someone did it before or not. Maybe Wojtek, you have more uh, ideas.
I haven't heard about anyone like splitting other things. I think there are definitely people that consider that like especially CRDs splitting off into a separated CD instance, but I don't know if like that happened for anyone. Um, uh, it's technically definitely possible. It just adds like another management or maintenance cost on you, but like it's definitely possible. For what it's worth, like GKE supports 15,000 node clusters, so like still not tens of thousands, but like 3x compared to the 5,000 node that we officially support in open source, and we are running like with two etcd instances. Like I mean the main one and the events one, and it's possible to make that work.
Yeah,
I think that
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention one more thing. I think it's like at that scale you start getting into multiple other problems, especially with like the underlying infrastructure. I don't know like what exactly the like things like networking stack you are using and so on, but like it's effectively the scale where you may start hitting bottlenecks at that layers too, in addition to like Kubernetes itself.
Yeah, and one thing I failed to mention earlier is that this would be for on premises. So we don't have the ability to use. I mean, we do use GKE and EKS quite a bit, but we've never had clusters over I think over 2,000 nodes in those environments. But yeah, this is for an on premises cluster, and I do think we would try to like split up some of the workloads that are like batch, from the real-time processing. Like we would try to like isolate things the best we can, but basically, I think because this is on premises, there's a little bit less flexibility for that. So that's one of the reasons we're kind of thinking about this. But from my perspective, and please like tell me if I'm wrong, but from what I've seen with our multi-thousand node clusters is that like the actual etcd API, or not the etcd, the API servers themselves are very rarely under load. And so, I think, or I'm kind of asking, like, is there a possibility that we, just segment the events API in etcd, or the events in etcd, and then it just works? Like, or, what are the types of things that, besides the networking stack, that you would kind of look out for in terms of cluster health or degrading?
So it definitely depends on like the workload you are running. Like Kubernetes networking features are one of the things that are like pretty heavy usually, at least some of those, like services, network policies, even more. Like, so like it very depends on like network policies is probably something that will not work at that scale.
Right. Yeah.
um but yeah, so it very very heavily depends on like the exact workload, like the throughput of the, like, what is the like number of pods per second that are changing and so on. Like all of that like heavily depends. Like for
Yep.
more basic workloads, or like not very heavy ones, for some definition of heaviness, like it's definitely possible that it can just work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're trying to figure out like what some of those metrics, like how many pods are being created and things like that, so we can try to model our workload. But I think we're too early to know if we can successfully replicate it. But yeah, that's super helpful info.
Yeah, and I think like another part to it is actually having good behaving clients that access Kubernetes control plane, right? Like I've seen multiple times where, like if you have some client that hits all the read requests to etcd because it doesn't use Informer, then it can actually cause quite significant problems in control plane. So that's another thing to consider, that you're running trusted workloads that actually, use Informers like they should, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's better than it used to be, like with priority and fairness and stuff like that. There will be like consistent lists from cache feature launching to beta and 131 and so on. So like it's improving, but still like, so it's a little bit harder to break your cluster unintentionally, but it's definitely still possible.
So actually, that what you said, that with priority and fairness, it's harder to break cluster. I think that's definitely true. One thing is like you need to configure priority and fairness correctly to
Yes.
have that protection, right? So that's probably something you also would like to take a look at that scale.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll definitely, sorry, I was trying to find the mute button. Yeah, we'll definitely be looking at that. I think thankfully this cluster doesn't have like a ton of like custom operators or schedulers or things that are using the API, like Kubernetes API, like heavily. It's mostly just kind of like scheduling pods and like restarts and rollouts, things like that. But yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on that, and maybe there's some rate limiting or something we can put in place. I don't think we have, or I don't think I've seen that on. We have like client side rate limiting that we have in a lot of places, but I don't know if Kubernetes supports rate limiting from the API servers. But if it does, we can look into that.
Yeah, so that's actually priority and fairness.
Okay.
What you can do is configure it on API server level and say like how many parallel requests are being executed. It also estimates like the cost of each request. So like if you are performing list requests of all the bots, then it will consider it being more costly, and it will allow less of those requests to be processed in parallel. So that's kind of like the control plane rate limiting essentially, but it's way more fancy than just saying rate limiting, I think.
Okay, yeah, I just found the documentation for that, so I'll make sure we read up on that. Oh, okay. This is for 129. Cool.
The priority inference was in beta since I think 120 or 121. So
Oh, okay. I just said that. Yeah,
there were many improvements, in following versions, but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I guess that was really the main thing. I was just kind of looking for some of these pointers for like jumping off points for things we can look into. I think, as we get, I'll try to join. If you guys are interested, I'll let you know how it goes. I think we're kind of planning on rolling out this cluster in the next month or so. But yeah, I think, this is a first for us. So hopefully thankfully I mentioned, this workload is pretty simple. Hopefully that'll help kind of make this a little bit more maintainable.
Yeah, that will help for sure. Like if the workload is simple. Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting for us to keep in touch. We can either talk asynchronously on Slack channel or just during our regular meetings. We are happy to help.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, I have one small. So yeah, I think. Can you go to the next topic, or do you want to add something to this one? Okay. So I have one really funny proposal. So I was thinking about adding like opt-in option for perf dash, where I could run. So what's the story? I do have running cluster loader in CI, and I'm exporting some results to perf dash. But once in a time, someone wants to run it on PR and see how it compares against CI runs, essentially, without needing to set up the Grafana and go through it. So I was thinking about adding opt-in option for perf dash that would allow you to also pull the PR runs and display them in the same dashboard, basically, but also kind of like marking that this run is from the PR. Does it sound reasonable to you, Wojtek?
Sure, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
like if you want to do that, I definitely won't stop you.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to get from you, basically. Like, okay, I will probably do that. Okay, I don't think we have more topics, so thank you all, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, see you.